Okay. So now we know that we can include JavaScript in three ways: from an external file, inside the head, or inside the body. And everything is executed in order. So if it's executed in order, it means that I can create a variable here. I'm going to create a global variable. Var equals name. Sorry, var name equals John. Okay. And the variable is declared inside functions JavaScript. Therefore, I can call John, alert here name, and I should be able to see John, right? Because it was created in line 7 inside the external file. So therefore, it will be available after line 7, so inside line 9 and also line 15. Pardon me?
You wouldn't need the second script in this case.
What second script?
The script type, you wouldn't need that.
Yeah, I need it. Yeah, I'm creating this. This is this line 7 is because I am calling my external JavaScript. Line 10, 11, 12. This is where I'm going to execute more JavaScript inside the head. So I'm going to alert name. Name was declared in an external file. Okay, was declared inside functions. John. This is coming from the head, right? And name is equal to John, which was declared inside functions. So it's respecting the order. Now, if the file functions is included after the alert, meaning here, it's not going to work because on line 7, the variable name is not declared. Nothing. Okay? Now, if I alert name inside the body, the first time is not declared, then it will be declared in the external file, and inside the body it will exist. So there is an order. You have to respect the order when you code. You have to make sure that whatever you want to use, it must have been coded, declared before that you can use it. Okay? So let's work with variables. We're going to use an external file to declare some variables. So var name, var lname, Smith. Okay. These two here are text. So text must go between quotes. You can use single quotes or double quotes. That's the same. Okay. So whenever you use text, that's called a string, and that should go between quotes. Whenever you're using numbers, okay, you don't have to use quotes. You just write the number. Variable age equals 35. Okay. Variable birth year, b year, equals, what would it be? 35 minus 13, like 1987, something like that. Okay. Now these ones here, they are integers. They're whole numbers. But if I have other type of numbers with decimals, such as, for example, variable revenue equals to 2,548 and 95 cents, right? When you have decimals, they are called float numbers, floats. Okay? So far these are the type of variables that we have. Strings, integers, and floats. Floats have decimal numbers, integers, no decimals. If you write numbers inside quotes, for example, credit card number. Five 1245, something like that. This is a string now. Why? For two reasons. I have quotes and I have spaces. A space is a character, right? Yeah, the space is a character. So therefore this cannot be a number anymore because a space is not a number. It's a character like A, B, C, D. It's a letter, not a letter, but it's a character. Okay? So I'm using quotes and I'm using spaces. If I didn't have the spaces, it could be considered as a number, but I still have my quotes. So if I have quotes, it's not a number anymore, it's a string. This would be a number. Okay? Then this will be an integer, correct? But it's not, right? I'm gonna have spaces and quotes. Now this is a string. Okay? So, if we remember that, if we take into consideration that everything is executed line by line in a specific order, I go back to index, and inside my script, I change name now equals to Peter, and I go back to the body and I alert name. Should I see John or Peter? Peter. Oh yeah, sorry, because, okay, you're right. Here, I should see Peter, because first it was declared as John, then I changed the value of name. I gave it another value. Now it's Peter. Okay? Peter. So, it means that even if you have created a variable before with a specific value, you can always modify it. Okay? When we're using strings, there's something called concatenation, and I'm going to create here another variable, last name. And last name is going to be equal to name plus, no, sorry, full name here. Full name is going to be equal to name plus last name. I am concatenating two variables together. I am adding them up. If these variables were numbers, it will add the values of the numbers. But now these ones are not numbers, they are strings. So it's going to join both strings together. Okay? So now I'm going to alert full name. Peter Smith. Now, if you notice, Peter Smith is together. There's no spaces. Why? Because name and last name have no spaces at all. I'm joining both variables together. So I can concatenate them adding a space. So I'm going to add another string, therefore I need quotes. Quote, space, quote. My string now is the space, it's a character, plus last name. So name plus space plus last name. Now I can alert full name as John space Peter space Smith. Peter Smith with a space. Okay? If I concatenate strings with numbers, meaning integers or floats, everything becomes a string. For example, full name plus space is plus age. It's going to say Peter Smith is 35
So you have to say age.
years old. Okay? So now I am adding a number, but since the rest is a string, everything will become a string. Peter Smith is 35 years old. Okay? Now, I can add age. For example, my variable age is 35. I'm going to change the value of age. I could say 35, which is its original value, plus 1. Let's say. I am using the plus sign with two numbers. Therefore, I am going to have a number as a result. I'm not going to have the concatenated value like 351. No, it's going to add 35 plus 1 equals 36 because both are numbers. So now age will be 36. 36. Okay? Now, instead of 35, I'm going to use the previous value of age, which was also 35. When age was declared, age is equal to 35. So I can add 35 plus 1 equals 36 and replace the value inside age. I'm going to save again inside age. So now age, which used to be 35, now it's 36. Again, here I am not concatenating because age is a number. I am really adding the values. Peter Smith is 36 years old. Now, I want you to understand this very clearly. If I convert 35 into string, what is it going to say in the alert? 351. Because I'm combining a string with an integer, it's concatenating them. So when you add strings with integers, it concatenates them. When both of them are numbers, it's going to add them. Okay? That's why I have 351. So if you're ever working on JavaScript and you find a huge number and you're like, where does that come from? It's because somewhere in your code, the number that you think is a number is actually a string. So you have to convert that string into a number, and to do so, we have a very beautiful function already created inside JavaScript, which is parse int. And parse int will convert any string into a number, as long as it's always a number inside. If you have characters, it's going to give you an error. Right? So now parse int will convert age, which was previously a string, will convert it into a number, and now as a number I can add it a plus 1, and this will become again 36. Okay? So parse int is converting strings to integers. If I am supposed to be using floats, then it's parse float. So I can use the decimal values. For example, I'm going to print revenue. I'm going to add revenue to my string. So Peter Smith is 35 years old and earns revenue a month. Okay? Now my string, there's an error somewhere. Huh? Revenue is not defined, so oh yeah, revenue. Peter Smith is 36 years old and earns $2,548.95 a month. Now,
Can you go back to it? Why dollars here?
I put the dollar sign here, so it could actually say
And dollar sign.
with the dollar sign as money. Okay, now revenue is a number of type float. Okay, if I convert revenue into parse int revenue, now revenue becomes an integer and I am going to lose my decimal values. 2,548. Okay, so you have to make sure if you're using floats, make sure you parse into float. If you're using int, make sure that you keep on using int. Okay. Now here I don't need to do this because from the beginning revenue is a number, it's a float. I don't need to parse it into anything. It's already a float. It was just to show you what happens if I convert it into an int. I'm going to lose the decimals. Okay? So parse int converts something into an integer without decimals. Okay, Peter Smith is 36 years old and earns $2,548.95 a month. Okay, now in programming they came up with this idea, which it's a very good idea. It simplifies things a lot. Is that instead of having, you want to increment something by one, which is something very common when we program. When we make a loop, we want to give count of things. So we want to increment by one. Every time we do something, plus one, plus one, plus one. So we can keep track of our actions. So adding plus one is a very common thing. Here what I have is that I have age that used to be a string is converted into an integer, into a number, and I'm adding plus one. Okay? Well, instead of having all the time age equals age plus 1, which will increment age plus 1, there is something called plus plus. And age plus plus is going to increment by 1 and change its value. So, now age, which started being 35, after that was converted into a string and added plus 1 becomes 36, and then here is going to become 37. Plus plus increments.
And what will it change?
37. Pardon me?
It will change according to what? Like I understand it's going to automatically add one.
It's automatically going to add 1 and change the value.
Time, like, say if you want to do it more than once, how would you like to do it?
We're going to see later there's something called loops.
Okay.
And the loop is going to be executed by itself, and it's going to increment by 1.
Like websites that have example
Like for example, you want to create a drop down menu with every single year from 1900 to 2000. So instead of typing 100 numbers, you can have a loop that is going to generate that for you 100 times. Okay? Alright, so we have h plus plus. Now, we can also have h minus minus. 36. It went down. Right? So I'm going to put a little note here. This is to increment. And this is to decrement. It changes the value. It will change the value of the variable. Okay? And this is the next thing I want to talk about. One thing is to change the value, and one change is just to, in that instance, obtain a new value without changing it. For example, h plus plus and h minus minus are changing the original value of h.
Could you set it to like x and then it
So
won't change h? Or could you set the variable to something else?
yeah, I could set the variable now to h equals something, and I am changing the value of h. H is not even is no longer a number even. Now it's a string that says something. Okay, I am changing the value. H now is something. The value 35 is lost, is gone. I am changing the value of h. So h plus plus, h minus minus, it not only increments, it changes the value of the variable. Okay? For example, if here in my string alert name is h plus 2, okay? So we started at 35. Here we increment plus 1, 36, 37, 36 again, h plus 2, 38. But h plus 2 is not changing the value of h. If I alert after h remains as 36. Because I do not have an equal here. I am not saying h equals now h plus 2. I am just using the value of h in that precise moment, adding 2, but I am not changing the value of 2. So it's 38, but the real value is 36. The real value is still 36. Okay? H plus plus will change the value. H plus 2 is not going to change the value. If I want to change the value, I'm going to have to say something like h equals h plus 2. Now I am changing the value of h. But just by doing h plus 2, I am just in that precise moment, that instance, I am adding 2 to h, but I am not changing the value. Okay? On the other hand, h plus plus and h minus minus do change the value. It will change the value. Yes? Pardon me? Plus plus, plus 1. Always 1. Minus minus, minus 1. Always in 1 unit. Huh? Plus plus works for floats. That's a good question. Let's see. Revenue. Let's have revenue plus plus. So revenue originally was 2,000. I'm gonna copy this, paste it here. So it's supposed to say 2549 after the plus plus. Let's see. 2549. The decimals are untouched. Added plus 1. Okay. Oh, I'm gonna save this.